Hi, morning everybody. My name is Mark Ransby, and obviously very happy to be over here. It's certainly a very interesting time to be over here, and I'm sure, like me, you woke up this morning and started considering the long-term geopolitical impact of Doddle, moving to a mobile platform. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to introduce you to Doddle. I'm going to talk about the value we've seen in moving to a mobile platform, how that's supported our customer experience, and also how Couchbase has both enabled and accelerated that process. And then I'll try and give you some insights into what we've done with the technology, how we've used it, and our next steps from there. So Doddle was started in 2014, and we've spent the last couple of years building a high-quality click and collect service with customer convenience at its core. Sure, no one needs reminding that e-commerce is growing, and click and collect is also growing. What we see in the UK is a particularly high percentage of retail sales being online sales, but there's a global trend. So we've grown a store network. Currently, we've got 70 stores conveniently located in the UK. We focus on very high footfall locations where we can provide a service that's literally a pop-in service that fits into somebody's busy day. We've got some flagship stores, and particularly in railway stations in London, Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds, as well as some concession locations where we occupy space in a partner's site. So we've got two core services. One is click and collect. So you order something online, something from Amazon, and for example, and you come into our store to pick it up rather than having that item delivered to your home or to your work. Often for busy people, it's not convenient to get something delivered to your home. You don't know if you're going to be in, you don't want to wait in for it. And more we're seeing that companies really don't like their employees having their online shopping delivered to the workplace, particularly in periods like Black Friday and Christmas. Companies are spending hundreds of thousands of pounds resourcing a mailroom to take a large volume of their employees' stuff. And unfortunately, in the world that we're living in, there's also a security implication to a lot of that. I used to work at the BBC, and if I had anything delivered to work, the BBC would take 2 days to X-ray it and then bring it through the building to the right place. Obviously, that was no small cost. So more and more, it's difficult to get stuff delivered to your home, and it's difficult to get it delivered to work. So another option is a super convenient click and collect location. Do you call it click and collect here? Is that a term you guys use, or is it store pickup or store pickup? Okay. So our other service is our return service. So you've ordered something online, you don't like it, it's the wrong color, it doesn't fit, it doesn't work, whatever that is. And it can be a real pain to get that item back to the online retailer, especially using normal shipping services. We've seen data that suggests that up to 20% of items that people buy online and then don't like never get sent back to a retailer. And the outcome of that is a loss of trust in that particular online retailer. I won't buy with them again. The thing they sent wasn't what I was expecting. So providing a really simple returns function is one thing we do. We help a customer with boxing something up, getting it to the right place, and if the return goes to one of our integrated partners, it's free to the customer. So all of that leads to a nice, convenient place to do your online shopping. And we even, in some of our larger stores, have changing rooms. So you can buy clothes online, have them all sent to a Doddle store, go in, try them on. And if they don't fit, you just hand them right back. So here to talk about our mobile application. I'll go through more detail about the technical architecture in a bit, but this gives you some idea of the screenshots. We use Couchbase Mobile in our application, and we hold a document for the light that describes the life cycle of an item going through our store. So an item arrives for collection by a customer, we create a document, we populate that document with whatever customer information we need, normally just enough to be able to identify the customer and give it to them. We will record events as it passes through, its location, what's happened to it, and any details of the checkout process. Similarly for returns, when a customer comes in with an item to send back to a retailer, we have a configurable set of data capture that quite often the retailer wants us to do. So things like return reason, order ID, all that sort of stuff. We capture that, it's in a Couchbase document. We barcode the item, we put that sits in the Couchbase document, and that Couchbase document lives on the handheld for the life cycle of that item as it passes through our store in either direction. So we work with over 70 retailers, and we appear as a click and collect location on their checkout. So for multi-channel retailers, we are really an extension of their other click and collect locations, but for pure play online retailers, we are their bricks and mortar store locations. Increasingly, not only are we offering that service, but retailers are also turning to us to ask for help in terms of running their own click and collect functions. And obviously we exchange appropriate data with our partners. So if you order something, we will get just enough data such that we can work out who you are, do any security checks that need to happen when you pick up your stuff. And similarly with a return, we'll be exchanging data with those retailers. And quite often that's a service that they can't get elsewhere. It's really handy for a retailer to know that I've got these items coming back, or the customer's collected that, or whatever it might be. And what's unique about Doddle is that we're a completely open click and collect location. So yes, we've got our partners that we integrate with, but customers can sign up for a Doddle account that effectively means that you have an address in every single one of our stores. So your mum could send you your birthday present to a Doddle store if you really wanted. That must have happened, although we don't have an example. But with lots of other services and pickup services, it's dedicated to the retailer. You order from retailer A, you need to pick up from their store. Something is being sent with that carrier, you need to go to their pickup point. But with Doddle, we see customers regularly coming in and collecting 2 or 3 items that have come from different places, but they can do it in one drop. So we think there's really great benefits for the customer, but also for our retail partners and for our logistics partners. So naturally, as customers come to us, we end up generating a set of consolidated drop-off points. So a carrier will come to us, Amazon Logistics will come to us and drop off 50 to 70 parcels in one drop, as opposed to going to 50 to 70 houses. So clearly there's a decrease in costs, especially there are no failed deliveries when they come to a Doddle. Ordinarily, we see about 11% of deliveries fail when they go into a house. So there's reduced environmental impact. And also, kind of crucially for us, we see it as a reduction in traffic, particularly in residential areas where it's very sensitive. And we also see lots of, besides the logistics benefits, we see a growing revenue opportunity for our partners as well. We've found the customers of our retail partners who use Doddle have an 11% higher average basket value, a 10% higher average basket size, and they shop about 3 times more often than customers on their site that are choosing a delivery option, a more traditional delivery option like delivery to home. And as I've said, we've got some concession locations, and where we put a concession into a partner retail environment, we see an 11% increase in sales. And if we offer returns as well as collections, it can be as high as 18%. And lastly, because we're an open click and collect service, the host retailer sees a wider demographic coming into their store. So for example, we have some concessions locations in some large hardware stores in the UK. And they've found that they're getting more women coming into their store and buying other things because online fashion purchasing is more heavily female skewed. But to get all those benefits, we actually need the customers to use Click and Collect. And they do, fortunately. Once we've found that a customer makes a mental switch into using a Doddle store, they keep coming back. And it's that super simple place where you can have all your online shopping come to the Doddle store and you can do all your returns too. And to reach more customers, we're growing our network. And you'll see on that slide that really we are pushing our concessions more than anything else. And a location of a store really is key to success. So then that's what's driven us to using a mobile platform. So why does mobile help? So looking at some of our retail spaces, there's some great big retail spaces, but quite often we're in train stations, cramped environments, and where you see more footfall, there's naturally more pressure on retail space. So in our bottom left one there, that is a Doddle store at Liverpool Street station in London. Before we moved in there, I think they were knocking out burritos. It's not a big store in size, and ultimately, space for IT equipment is less space for parcels and people. So the point is that the location beats the size consideration. If the people are there and the footfall is there and it's right for our customers, that's where we go. And excuses about we can't fit the IT in don't wash. Also, we need to be open at times that our customers want to use our service, not just from the point of view of the staff being there, but our systems need to work too. We have, again, location beats ease of putting in internet connections. Those excuses don't wash either. And we've had every type of failure of DSL line you could think of. So we've had a leaky roof in a train station causing cables to corrode. We've had a train run over a duct that cracked some cables. The Liverpool Street one, I think that there's a pub next to there, and reports are some late night revelers came out and knocked something that they shouldn't have and knocked out our internet connection. So wired internet connections are not working well for us. It's difficult, it's expensive to manage. So we could go to mobile. We can get great 4G networks in the UK. But the problem is when our customers show up, it's rush hour. And they've all got their phones on, and they're saturating the local mobile network. So effectively, at that point, our customers saturate the network we're using to serve them, and we stop work. Hi.
Why don't you ask them to put a transponder at the top of your building so you might be able to deal with more?
So we don't own the building. Normally, in these sort of cases, we're kind of squeezing ourselves into the side of a busy train station where we don't have, we wouldn't have the option to put in additional equipment. We often need to go in fast. We have looked at other options, putting our own Ethernet lines. That takes months to arrange. It's very expensive. What we've fallen back to is saying that we need a tolerance to not having a network connection. We need a tolerance to having a poor network connection. So having a mobile solution and running Couchbase Mobile to have a local data cache to allow us to serve those customers is what we've done instead. And lastly, customer service focus. We want our staff to be relaxed and confident and friendly when they're serving the customer. And that's really hard if you're not relaxed and confident about your ability to use the system and the fact that your system may or may not work when you need it to. So mobile is great for that. Everybody's used to their smartphones. Picking up an app and playing with it is quite natural to a lot of people. And we found that training is a lot quicker too. We've managed to abstract a lot of our more complex processes in the application. So training is down from up to 5 days down to a day. And then we focus on refresher training rather than a big upfront training requirement. So there was our old system. So what was wrong with it? It was no one specific thing, except for the fact it was big, it was more expensive, it was harder to deploy. But the key pain point for us was that when we struggled to provide quality network connections into our locations, we either got slow performance or we got no performance. And that inconsistent performance is really hard to work with. So when a customer comes into the Doddle store, we aim to serve them within a minute, and consistently within a minute. And if we've got a slow performing system, that just doesn't happen. So instead, we've moved to a mobile store system. You're running Couchbase Mobile locally and syncing up to Couchbase Server, which we host in AWS via the Sync Gateway. So how does Couchbase fit into our architecture? So I've got a couple of slides on what our architecture looks like. We've got lots of stuff in AWS, and we're using lots and lots of thing as a service. So we're in AWS with some APIs in EC2, backed onto Dynamo, and also we are using more Lambda and looking at a serverless architecture. So we've got Lambda backing onto Dynamo as well via the API gateway. But the point is we don't support a lot of our own infrastructure. We rely on Amazon, and we also use things like Stormpath, Loggly, Twilio, things like that. We also have an event-driven architecture. So when an API, when something happens on one of our APIs and make a change to the database, we will raise an event that goes onto a topic. Interested consumers in our architecture will ingest that topic. They'll subscribe on the topics they're interested in. When they get an event, they will use it to, for example, populate our analytics database, something like that. So we've got we're using things like we're using SNS and SQS for the plumbing, and Lambda for a lot of our functions. So it's really important that to fit in our architecture, we can get some events out of Couchbase. Now, it's not very, especially if you're offline and we make something happens, for example, I scan your parcel onto the shelf in store so it's ready for collection. It's very difficult it's more difficult to put an event into our infrastructure to say that that's happened. But fortunately, Couchbase sorts this out for us. When the handheld comes online, we sync that data up to Couchbase Server, and then we use your webhooks to generate an event onto our topics. Now, there'll be lots of components that care about that event. One of them in particular will be the SMS component that texts the customer to say, right, your thing's in store, come and collect it. So as I said, we're replicating down data onto our handhelds. And the one feature we really like about Couchbase is the channels in Sync Gateway. So in our world, a channel in Sync Gateway is kind of analogous to a role. When you log on as a member of staff to our next-gen app, you authenticate against our authentication service, and you get back a scope, which is basically the list of channels that you're allowed to work with. So it could be that I'm allowed to work in a couple of our stores. And the great thing about that is because I'm subscribing a particular person onto a particular channel, which is a particular store's worth of data, I don't ever have customer data on a handheld unless the person working on that handheld needs to have it. So from a data protection perspective, we really like it. It's a great story that we can we know that we've got a minimal set of customer data sitting on a handheld. And it also works great from terms of our workforce. So allowing staff to work in more than one store with a mobile device, suddenly we're in a world where instead of fixed devices in our store, we might have a flexible workforce with a personal device, and on different days that person can go to a different store, log on, get down the data for the store they're working in that day, and work in that store. When we get to peak, if there's a risk of a particular store having a huge, customers, queuing out the door, we can just get somebody from another store to bring their handheld to that store and start work and start serving customers. The other thing we can do is we can give them access to like a training store. So in quiet times in the middle of the day, for example, when people are at work, there might be a new feature in the app. We might have turned up in our data that a particular store is struggling with a certain process. We can ask them to flip onto a training store and do some training all on the same device. And then when the customers are ready to come back in again, we flip back onto the store that they're working in and serve the customers. The other thing we do, there's a little snippet from our sync function there, is once we've finished the process, we mark the document that describes the end-to-end process as completed. And at that point, our sync function takes that document out of the channel, and again, the data's gone. So customer data is not hanging around, not aggregating on handhelds. It's only there when it needs to be. So bringing those things together, I've got an overly complex diagram. And I thought about giving you a simplified version of this diagram, but then I thought, actually, it's not that bad. And maybe it is that bad. But actually, those are all the components that we use to support collections end to end. And they all fit on one picture, and that's not bad, especially as there's some very small functions there that are quite atomic. On the upper right-hand side, you can see that's our mobile application. It's running Couchbase Mobile. We sync down via Couchbase Sync to Couchbase Server. And at that point, we generate webhooks. The webhook generates events into our topic. And then we have lots and lots of little Lambda functions that do useful jobs to transfer data between our API platform and Couchbase Server via Couchbase Sync. So if you order something from Amazon, we will get a message from Amazon to say that's happened. That'll hit one of our APIs. There'll be an event raised. One of our functions will create a document in Couchbase that'll get synced down to the store that your thing's going to say, here's some customer data about this parcel that's coming to that store. When it arrives, somebody will scan it in. They'll put it on a shelf. That data gets synced down. We get an event. We send you a text message, and so on and so forth. When you come in and collect it, we do some ID checks. We do the checkout process. That all gets recorded, or gets fed into analytics. So we have this constant replication between our stores, Couchbase Server, and our API platform, and it's all event-driven. So it's that simple. So the other thing to say, the other thing we've learned is we obviously, in modern architectures, we put APIs in front of data stores. So we've got a well-defined interface between our application and our data store. So we've got that here. We've got an API in front of Couchbase Server and Couchbase Sync. So when any of these functions do stuff with Couchbase, they go through an API. But obviously, the same document also exists up in Couchbase Mobile. So we've had to think very carefully about the fact that there's an API here, but we're dealing with an SDK up there that is actually not the same component as our API. So we've had to have very clear sort of rules of engagement around the development of that mobile app, how we present the interface to the data within the mobile app. I think so far we're in a good place. I think moving forward, as we do more with this type of application, we might think about having our API and SDK as like a pair that we test together. But that's just one thing we're thinking about. But it certainly is a bit of a mental switch to think about using an SDK rather than an API. Next one, so particularly when one of our stores goes offline, we will end up with a situation where we might get document conflicts. So this is where Couchbase looks after revisions of a document. And if two handhelds in an offline state do something with the same parcel, we might end up with sort of two version 17s. And then we have to work out which one's right. Or maybe they're both right, and we need to keep data from both and do a merge. So that hasn't actually been as big a problem as we thought it was going to be. And we managed to work around a lot of the problems by thinking through our processes quite carefully. And also by making sure that we only ever append to documents. So if you're thinking about document conflicts, it's quite easy to think. I tend to think in a simple way about if you're collaborating on a spreadsheet on Dropbox. If you both add, then it's quite easy to make sure that you can then merge those things. If somebody's deleting and somebody's adding and then they're deleting and so on and so forth, then it becomes much more difficult. So our rule is that we only ever append to a document, and we also record events as we do things. If any of our APIs act on a Couchbase document, or if the handheld acts on a Couchbase document, it records an event, it says what happened, it has a timestamp, it has some extra metadata, and that way we can always look back and see what the order events were. So we're using document attachments. When your parcel comes into a Doddle store, we take a photo of it, and that really helps from an operational perspective. Sometimes things do go wrong, things are addressed wrongly, data doesn't arrive when it should have done. There's lots of ways that these processes can fall down, and if customer services have to get involved, then having a photograph of your parcel with exactly what the labels looked like really helps us resolve problems, serve our customers better. And we're also thinking about perhaps we can start using things like image recognition APIs to automate some things. There's a small amount of data entry sometimes we have to do when something arrives, and I think maybe we can automate that, but we haven't got very far down that line yet. It's just the lines along we're thinking. When we do take a picture, again, we get an event. It goes up to Couchbase server, we generate an event, and we have a Lambda function that stores our images in an S3 bucket, and then when we finish dealing with your item going through our store, we remove the image from Couchbase Mobile so that we don't have too many in there. I think in terms of our volumes, we don't have in terms of some of the numbers that Couchbase can do, we don't have big numbers. We probably would look at a maximum of 1,000 to 1,500 parcels in play at any one point in time in a store. So I think generally that's well within what the product's capable of. But having 1,500 1 meg images doesn't help things, so we try and keep that under control. Okay, so that's the let's run through the features that we're using. So where are we up to? So we started our first workshop on the project concept in February, and we started talking to the Couchbase guys in London at that point. We started, according to Jira at least, we started development on the 26th of April, and our first store went live on the 14th of July. We're live in 20 of our stores, and it's now our default. It's now our default deployment. We don't deploy our first generation systems at all now. So I think it's fair to say that we probably wouldn't have been able to hold that timetable if we'd needed to engineer around selective replication, offline storage, versioning, conflict resolution, generating events. If we'd had to do all that sort of stuff, we would not be live already. So we've got there because Couchbase delivered those features for us. And really looking back, that was the key decision we had to make. So I've said that we don't look after a lot of our own infrastructure. We're lucky we're a young company. We don't have lots of legacy sitting there that we're replatforming to the cloud. We're straight in the cloud. But we're not that big a team. So we don't have a database team sat looking after all our databases. We've been using things like Dynamo and RDS instead. So to take on feeding and watering a database felt like a pretty big decision for us at the time. But I think it's definitely fair to say that we wouldn't have had the features we got outweighed that overhead. And it's also worth saying that we had great support from the Couchbase team when we were thinking about making this decision. So people like Simon Lee and Paul Ivan. And what we particularly valued was that we got a very collaborative and open approach to choosing the product. Couchbase didn't try to tell us that this problem, we were going to solve every problem. They were upfront about what the product was good at, what we shouldn't try and do, what's coming but isn't there yet, and that was really good. I think we were talking last night and saying that the guy that built this building didn't want to hear from his steel girder guy that they could take any load. What you actually want is a clear view of what the product does and what it doesn't do, and that's exactly what we got. So that was really valuable. And also the fact that we can, you've seen from our architecture diagram, we've clearly placed this right at the center of our key systems. So having the support, having the support from Couchbase has been important to making that decision as well. So what's coming next? We are thinking about, we're thinking about starting out with peer-to-peer replication. We haven't done any of that yet. So if our stores go offline at the moment, data doesn't replicate between handhelds. But we think adopting that will help us in a couple of ways. So we don't think it will eliminate conflict resolution, but it might stop some of the conflicts that we need to resolve. And but also we can start to enable different functions in some of our larger stores. So if you can imagine a store where we meet customers here, but our parcel room is a ways away, we can have some communication and collaboration between different handhelds in the store. We might also be able to have some more developed kiosk functionality where staff arrive and they check in themselves, and that triggers some sort of back-end process. So we're looking at that. We're also using exactly the same pattern, so Couchbase Mobile in an Android application to power our logistics applications. We've just gone live with our hub application. So we've got a couple of warehouses where we route items to and from retailers. So we've just gone live there, and we're also looking at replatforming the app that we give to our logistics drivers. And the other thing to say, although I'm not sure this diagram's geographically accurate, is that we're rolling out a lot of stores. We will go into hundreds of stores next year with the technology. So that is absolutely a vote of confidence in the platform and the technology and what we've seen from it so far. I think that's it from me. I'm happy to take any questions.
How are you modifying Sync Gateway documents from this API? Is it not the REST API that Sync Gateway offers, or is it something else?
No, so we've got we've put an API in front of. So I guess it's probably worth saying that I don't know if this is changing at any point in the near future, but when we're using Sync Gateway, we have to write to Sync Gateway and read from Couchbase Server. At least that's what we do. So so we put an API in front of those two components. So a REST API that provides a set of methods on either our collection documents or our returns or whatever that is. That's a well-defined interface that then other components use. So, but what we're aware of is that we might make a change to that API that breaks our mobile application. We might make a change to our mobile application that somehow breaks our API. So we want to try and test those two things together. So what we're thinking is if we do something like wrapping Couchbase Mobile with our own SDK that has a similar set of interfaces to our API, it might not be identical, but the appropriate ones, then we can take those two things and test them as a unit. But it's a bit like, those old architectures where you'd see a big database in the middle and the database is at the center of everything. What we want to do is make sure that we're still maintaining a well-defined interface onto our data store, even though that data exists in different places and in different technologies, if that makes sense. Hi.
What's the distance location between different stores?
Did you repeat it? Recording, did you repeat it?
I was kind of curious, what's the distance spacing between the stores where you might be able to do line of sight for part of the networking?
So generally, we did think about line of sight once. For a while, we had two stores in Liverpool Street Station for a while, and one had a pretty decent network connection, and the other one had like a wet piece of string. So we were thinking about whether or not we could do some sort of line of sight. Again, quite often in these sort of things, whenever we're around a station in the UK, there's a set of regulations we have to fit in with. So, it's all because of the sort of security things we all have to deal with. So, we couldn't just put up a directional Wi-Fi or some sort of microwave link or anything like that, even though we did think about it. In London, our stores aren't a huge distance apart. And we've got a lot based in London, in central London, and out in some of the suburbs. We've got, but we're in Birmingham, in places like New Street Station, and also a couple of universities in Birmingham. Manchester the same. But we're rolling a lot more into our concession locations. So then we're really driven by the locations of our retail partners. So that might be supermarkets, where we're finding space in supermarkets, and at that point, we really also then listen to our retail partner about what footfall looks like, what sort of services they want to introduce in their store. So yes, we have our sort of key backbone in the metropolitan areas, but as we move out from there, the concession locations is where that's going to happen, and that's really the enabler that mobile has given us as well, is ease of deployment and size of kit. I was in one of our supermarket partners' premises, and we just put this, like a bit like this, smaller. We just put a desk in, and where we could serve customers, and we were plugging in some of our equipment. I was going to check everything was okay, and we had a gap about that big from the wall, and you could see the manager of the store was furious that whoever had put this podium in had wasted like 3 inches of his floor space. He was so the pressure on retail space, and also that we don't disrupt our partners when we go in. We don't want our partners to say, all right, we got a Doddle into one of our stores, and it was a right pain, and we had to run networking cables, and we had to do this, and we had to do that. What we want them to say is, it was dead simple. They got a mobile device out of the box, they turned it on, and they were done. And there was no disruption, and we just had to, there will be some things we need to prepare, but what we shouldn't be doing is pulling their store apart. We should be as light touch and as frictionless as possible.
Hi, can you talk a little bit about the network topology that you have deployed today and where you're going in the future before you get to maybe peer-to-peer?
So when you say network topology, do you mean like in terms of our flow, where our Couchbase components are? Right. Okay, so because what we're moving from is actually we've had our existing systems in co-located hosting over a private MPLS network, which it's been good, but also probably difficult to connect into, and probably more than we needed. So we are just connecting over the internet. We have hosted Couchbase server in AWS on EC2. Couchbase Sync we've also had on EC2, although we are talking to your guys about whether or not we should be on Docker. But in terms of network provision, our handhelds just need a network, an internet connection. We kind of like what tends to happen is we can't do the end-to-end process without some sort of communication link. So at some point when your parcel arrives in our store and we want to send you a text to come and get it, we need to go online to do that. But what we can do is we can take stuff off the van and scan it and put it on the shelf all offline. And then if needs be, the staff could go around the corner to the Starbucks, hop on the Wi-Fi, replicate it up and replicate it down, and then go back to the store and carry on serving the customers. So that's not ideal, but ultimately we're a lot more flexible, and we can get away with short network outages. We can do a lot more tactical things. And if we've got all the data replicated down onto the handheld ready to serve our customers that are coming in rush hour, then it doesn't matter that they're all about to saturate the mobile, the local cell tower, because we've already got the data on the handheld and it's ready to go. Does that answer your question, or was there anything else specific? Okay. Cool. I think that's it. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be here. Thanks.